What I would like to talk about tonight is a figure in German literature who was very philosophically minded. In fact, I would call him an anticipator of what all of us are involved here at EGS. Largely a thinking by way of deconstruction, by way of opening up encrusted concepts, and also possibly arriving at an ethics that is no longer based on oppositional structures, but on a relatedness that is going hand in hand, and I'm taking a risk here, with a certain, and the word has to be put in scare quotes, with a certain ontology that spells a kind of relatedness of everything to everything. The writer I'm talking about is one that is read too little, not only in Europe, but especially in the United States, and maybe this feeble attempt to characterize him in the context that I've established will whet your minds to give him a try. It is the writer Robert Musil, who is most famously known in academic circles for the man without quality, or man without qualities. Popularly is known, although it's not a popularizing novella, it's Der junge Törles, right. Here I go again. Yes, which was filmed, made a film of. Young Törles is the name of the novella. Also an excellent piece of literature. He's fairly well known for this even in the United States, especially among film people. What I would like to talk about tonight is the philosophical dimension that Musil lends to his writing. And among the notions that I want to dwell on are the ones of utopia and what Musil came up with called essayism. Now, I would like to warn you right away that utopia is undergoing a definite twist here. It is not the utopia that we usually have in mind as the achievement of an endpoint, of completion, of satisfaction, fulfillment. Not at all. It's almost, no, I would say it's more than the reverse of this. Hand in hand with that notion of Musilian utopia goes the idea of essayism. Essayism is obviously related to the literary genre essay, but in Musil's writing it becomes more. It relates, as you will see as I go on, after this brief sketch and outline, it has to do with our somewhat anachronistic word to assay, to attempt something. I'd like you to note right away that in attempt, you also have the idea of tempting. Okay, attempt, tempting, Versuch, Versuchung in German. I'd like you to keep this in mind, just that you have an idea where I might be heading. Now, let me start with what I just very recently translated in English. The point of departure of Musil's essayism is his radical skepticism over against the concepts of the ego and thing or substance, which he finds prefigured in Nietzsche's philosophy of becoming and the theory of functionalism, put that in quotes, of Ernst Mach. For those people who've never heard of Ernst Mach, in this context, I just want to remind you that he was a scientist, also a philosopher of science, and he came up with the idea of Mach in flight. So many Machs, right? Do you know what I'm talking about? Okay. Similarly to Nietzsche's view of the world as radically transitory and composed of elements that are not isolated and opposed to one another, but inherently and irreducibly interconnected, thus forming a complex whole, Mach views everything as a function of everything else. Therefore, the word or term functionalism. I quote him, "An isolated ego, an isolated thing do not exist. Thing and ego are provisional fictions of a similar kind." It is from this perspective that Musil has Ulrich, the protagonist of Mann ohne Eigenschaften, or Man Without Qualities, say, "Out of my insight into the instability, the unfeste, the unhard and fast of the world and the ego, I consider no thing as stable, no ego, no order." Mach's view of the mathematical notion of function, that's a quote, that shows the, quote, mutual dependency of phenomena also suffuses Musil's view of causality and diametrical oppositions. This implies a structure of the world, Musil's quote, as an unending system, I'm continuing the quote here, an unending system of interconnectedness in which independent meanings that ordinary life ascribes to actions and qualities as a first rough approximation are not existence at all any longer. Ulrich, I should say here / Musil, because much of Musil's philosophy is contained in the figure of Ulrich and his sayings. Ulrich Musil applies this inability to achieve within the structure of the world independent meanings also to the notion of conceptualization, or in German, begreifen. I'd like you to note that begreifen is cognate to English grip or grasp. That is being challenged. Instead of arriving at generalizations via concepts, or in German, Begriffe, authentic, for Ulrich Musil, authentic conceptualization understands experiences not as isolated, but as dependent one on the other. So that a word loses its individual sense, in German Eigensinn, it's almost like a certain sense or meaning has a property value, eigen, ownness in that sense, and gains a neighborly sense, Nachbarsinn. Where it's neighborly sense always being related to otherness. The functionalistic notion of the world as an unending weave of relations that is based on the quote unquote, here Musil undertakes a twist on Leibniz, the principle of insufficient reason. In German it would be ground, insufficient grounding, lacks any foundation of deduction in the form of principles such as causa prima or causa finalis. What is necessary, therefore, is, quote, an inductive attitude, that is, a way of cognition that does not depart from first and last principles, but approaches the world as an, quote unquote, open system, as inherently without closure, quote, without end and decision. I'm tempted to translate decision here also as judgment. In its orientation towards the radical openness of the world, this attitude of inductive thinking is one that, in the context of the unending connectedness of the world, is able to reach only, quote, partial solutions, a provisional fixing or definition. Simultaneously, inductive thinking always constitutes an element of doubt with regard to its goal that Musil calls its utopia,